There's me at 14 when I come over.
Oh my God, you were so handsome. You just, wow, that's beautiful. And would they have
The Holmes took that.
Holmes took that, and then they sent you off.
Yep.
And did they tell you how to pose, or that was just your
No,
personality
no.
coming through?
They took the picture of everybody when they come in the home and when they leave the home.
Let me see the bigger one that you have there.
Yeah,
I guess we'll see it again, but
Yeah.
wow.
So now, Mr. Hewitt, what I'll do is, this one is on you now. Unfortunately, at least it's black. So you know what? I'm going to suggest I think we can put it just, if you don't mind, maybe just. I don't want to have you even thinking about it. I'm going to. You know what? We're going to put it on here. So.
Oh, I see you have Sandra Joyce's book here.
Yes, I've started into it. I haven't got in too far in yet.
No, it's a good book. Oh.
Yeah, she was up and gave a talk at the Sarnia Library a week or two ago.
And that's how she met you, correct?
Yeah, well, she was doing the show, and she got to a talk. Then it was question time, and God, they were asking questions, and you know, really keeping her busy. And I kept putting my hand up, and she never saw me because I was in the back row. And then finally, I stood up and I said, "If you want to know about the homeboy, let me tell you, because I am one."
Wow.
Well, she's come on down. So that's the way it started there. That's when she presented me with her book. And
Mr. Hewitt, thank you very much for letting us come today. And if you wouldn't mind, it's December 1st, it's 2012. And could you start with your full name and date of birth, where you were born, and let the story evolve, and we'll go from there.
well, my name is Cyril Hewitt. I am. You want my
Date of birth?
Date of birth.
Yes.
My date of birth is January 13, 1924. I was born in Yorkshire, England, Castleford, Leeds. And I had 3 brothers older than me as the family, and mother and father. And in 1928, my mother and father put all of us, all the boys, into the care of Dr. Bernardo Holmes. The reason being, my father was a coal miner, out of work, no money coming in. They were living in a caravan. Now, if you don't know what that is, that's like a gypsy wagon in England, which the people live in. And therefore there was not much room for anybody to be there. So in 1928, they put us on a train, headed down to Woodford Bridge, Essex, which is south of London. And at Woodford Bridge, Essex, there was a new boys' home there called the Boys' Garden City, Woodford Bridge, Essex. And in that home establishment, there were 21 cottages. Cottages being big house, mind you. Two and a half dormitories and 2 playrooms up and down, with 35 boys per house. Now that house was governed by 2 ladies, the senior being the matron and the junior being the miss. And the matron looked after the upstairs with the boys, and the miss was downstairs. This reason being to take care of the work that had to be done in the house. Now we boys maintained all the housework. We weren't sitting there idle and being fed for nothing. We had to make the beds in the morning. We had to ronic the floors, that's like a wax, and polish them every morning. The floors in the downstairs rooms were done also. All the walls around the lower building inside were were high gloss paint, shall we say, up to about 4.5 feet. And this had to be oiled once a week, polished. The windows had to be cleaned inside and out once a week, usually on Saturday. If we got it done quick enough, we could go out and play football. So you know, we worked and got the work done. But every boy was responsible for a certain job. Because in that home you had facilities for boys and whatever. The lavatories where all the piping was brass. So they had to be polished every day with brasso. So they were the brasso boys for upstairs and downstairs. That was their jobs. The rest of us were divided into the various groups to do whatever work had to be done under the supervision of the matron and the miss. Now, this was an everyday occurrence. You got up about 6:30 in the morning, and you had to stand at the end of your bed in your nightshirt for the matron to come around and inspect you to make sure that you hadn't wet the bed. And if you had, that wasn't a good sign. So there was punishment for that, but there was also one cottage in the homes that if they were real bad at that type of thing, they were in that home. But that's beside the point. These things do happen. And now, the matron would appoint one boy to be a prefect. You know what that is? He's a boy kind of put in charge, as you might say. But he could be a mean little bugger. And when he was, too. They used to inflict punishment on the boys for you weren't allowed to talk in certain times, at certain hours, or whatever. You had a reading time, you already had a play time, and it was very strict. And this was the way it was all through the home. After the morning chores were done, it was the responsibility then to go to the downstairs facilities, and everybody had to strip to the waist and wash hands, feet, whatever, and then be inspected by the matron. And she would have you come up, and you'd have to put your hands out, turn them over so she could see them clean, and the elbows and all that, and look at everything, and then she'd pass you. Each boy had a number, which took care of his roll call, his laundry and towels and stuff, which were all maintained by the girls' village home, which was about 6 miles away. It was a girls' home with maybe about 1,500 girls in it. So they used to do the laundry for the home, and that's how that transpired. After that was done, you dressed, and you paraded outside the cottage, 2 lines, and you were marched down to the dining hall, which would be quarter mile, shall we say, and then paraded into the dining hall. Each cottage had their own table assignment, and we had to go in there and sit at the table, or stand at the table first, before you were allowed to sit, because you had to say grace in unison. And then that was done. Then the dining hall master would give the word, and the representatives from each table would go to where the kitchen was there and be served whatever was coming out. So.
Do you mind me asking, do you remember the grace you said before meals?
Well, there were different graces because every once in a while they'd change them. And we'd have to memorize them, and some were sung and some were repeated. Right off the bat, I just...
Don't worry.
Some were psalms, but it was just a way of getting us to be more religious, shall we say. Yeah. Breakfast consisted of oatmeal porridge, cup of milk, and that was it for the day. until lunchtime, which was same procedure. Maybe soup, maybe split pea soup and bologna. It could be anything. They had a good variety of stuff. Sunday was always the bigger dinner, the hot dinner, shall we say. And we survived on it. Most of the stuff was, shall we say, charity offered. And that's the way the homes were run. It was on charity. That's how Dr. Bernard set it up. That everything there was charity. And we appreciated what we got and survived on it. After the meal was over, breakfast or whatever it was, we were then paraded back to the house, and if it was in the morning, you had to get ready for school. Now, schooling was very strict. They had a school inside the homes called the Tin School, which took about half of the boys of the city, Boys Garden City. The other remainder had to march out of the compound up to Stakes Lane Station, where there were public schools and where they were taught there. But they were paraded strictly, march, no talking in the ranks, and then to school, back to home for lunch, back to school again. So it was quite a regimented thing. I was put in the home at 4. As I say, not much recollection of before that. But after getting to the home, the boys' home was my life. There were 750 boys in the home, and we all mingled and associated. There was everything else there too. There was the bullying and there was this and that and what goes on in any organization. But you learn to live with it. At the time that I was scheduled to come to Canada to sail, about a month before, they arranged for me to go back to Yorkshire by train with somebody else as a chaperone to meet my mother and father, or to say goodbye. Well, we get there at what it's called an ever-open door. They were stationed all over England. This is where children were placed in these ever-open doors to be transferred to the various homes. When I got back to Yorkshire on this occasion and met my mother and father, strange to say, but it has to be said, I had no feeling for them. My life had all been a grown-up boy in a boys' home. They never came to see us because they were too poor. I got a letter every once in a while from mother, but just, you know, how are you doing, whatever, and nothing too particular. Now, let's go back a little bit further to the back as we arrived. We were all put in the same cottage, thank goodness. So I had protection that way. I had my big brothers to look after me. But as you reach the age of 14, you are automatically put out of school. You've had enough schooling. And then they transfer you out of the home to some job or to some place to apprentice. Maybe it was all farm work, I don't know. But there were other places they went. Okay? Other boys in the home, reaching age 14, had choices. The Dr. Bernardo home system was made up of many homes. Mine was the boys' home. And as you reached 14, you were put out into the world, as they call it. You had the opportunity, if you had the skills, to be transferred to Golding's home, which was in Hartford, England. And at this home, boys 14 up to 21 learned all the trades that were to be learned, such as shoemaking, carpentry, tinsmithing, All those type of jobs were taught to them there. Then they went out into the various jobs. There were two other very good places to go if you were inclined and wanted to be a sailor. There was the Watts Naval School, which was the British Royal Naval training type of schooling for seaworthiness. And then there was the Russell Coates Naval School, which was for merchant marine sailing. So they had the choice of going to there. And they were trained in all the aspects of the naval life. And then from there, when they went to various ships and whatnot, as they reached a certain ages. So there was opportunities galore in there to do. Now I said the life in there was strict. Everything was run like a military academy, shall we say. You were marched here, you were marched there, and everything was disciplined right up the center. And our athletics director was a man called Mr. Milson. He was an ex-Royal Marine soldier. Tough, brawny. You stepped out of line, you got the biggest whop across your ear that you ever did have. Because that was the way they did then. They call it abuse today, but that was discipline in those days. So it's looked at differently. If you don't behave, you get what is coming to you. So he was our athletics director. But he was a good, fair man. And you didn't get it unless you really had to have it. And he ran all our athletic programs, such as the soccer schedules for running. Well, it was run just like a National League program. You had your teams competing, your houses competing, and your finals and everything like that. And that was the winter operation. Summertime was cricket. And you learned to play the game, and he was the guy that made sure you learned the game and umpired and done all the things that if there was correction to be done, he did it. He showed you how, told you how. The eldest was George William. He was years older than I was. Then there was Francis Jeffrey. He was a couple of years younger than George. Then there was Stanley James, and he was 3-4 years older than I was. And as they came of age, they were transferred out. Brother George, the eldest, ended up in the coal mines in Yorkshire, just like his dad. Brother Francis, I had never heard from him after he left, not until after the Second World War. When he came back to England, and he wrote me a letter stating that he had been a prisoner of war in Malta. So we were commute back and forth for a few letters, and Brother Stanley, when he left the homes, he ended up joining the British Army, British Imperial Army. I would say that would be 1936, somewhere in there, and spent those years. He joined what they call the 2nd Leicestershire Battalion, and they were shipped to Ceylon, India, and remained there all through the war. And we communed back and forth all the time, all the years. And when he returned to England, which was in the 50s, he contacted me, letters again, and he'd come back from the east full of malaria. So he wasn't much good to anybody anyway. He got jobs on the buses, whatever, and driving buses for a while. Then next thing I know is I have no more contact. He's gone. So my brothers are gone, and I'm the last one in the line as far as that goes. But yeah, everybody goes their own way, and it was full of all kinds of boys, different ages. They were coming and going all the time. Some of it had the taste of home life more so than others. those were the ones that felt it the most. And they're the ones that usually ended up what they call doing a bunk, which was running away, running out of the home's compound and fleeing for your life, shall we say. But he would be caught in no time short because we were all dressed alike. Gray short pants, gray jersey, stockings were gray with two rings of green around the top. So you were all dressed alike. So all a cop had to do, hey, there's a homeboy. And he was nabbed right away and brought back. There was punishment for that, yes. And that was delivered by the governor of the home. That's like capital punishment, because that was a thing you don't do, is run away. So he would get 6 of the best with the cane across his bare buttocks. That was the punishment. He didn't do it again. He'd think twice. So, otherwise than that, the odd clip across the ear or something like that. But the school teachers were just as mean with their authority, shall we say, because if they assigned you to do some work, and in those days we had the old inkwell, the old nib type, and if you made a blot on your page, or misspelt something, or got something wrong after you were supposed to know it, they would have you go up in front of the class, one hand, the other hand, and come down with a cane on both your hands, 6, or like 3 on each hand. And they loved to catch the tips of your fingers and your thumb, so that when you got back to your seat, you couldn't write anyway. So that's how the teachers were. There was no control of them. What I mean, they were running the class, and you got a class of 30-odd boys or so, and you got to have discipline. That's the way they meted out discipline. But other than that, you got by because I don't know. It just hit you. You're having fun. I mean, when you weren't doing the menial chores, you were out playing in the fields, running through the grass or whatever, and playing tin can copper, all these games you had to play. And you didn't just stay with your own houseboys, you mixed with everybody. When they let me out of school, I was assigned to the painters gang. Now, in the home there was say a group of 4 to 6 men, and it was their job to rotation paint each house internally and externally, whatever had to be done. And I was assigned to the painters to be their painter's boy, to make the tea for them and run the errands and things like that, mix the paints and whatever. Oh, clean the brushes. It's just an apprentice type of thing you're learning. And then that year I was 14, I got a call from the governor to meet him at the governor's house. It was on a Sunday morning. And when I got there was several other boys there too. And he explained about coming to Canada. That there was an option of coming to Canada. They're going to send a contingent out. Would any of us be interested? Of course. I jumped at it. My idea of coming to Canada wasn't going to be a cowboy. I was a cowboy, all right. Just milking them right away. Yeah, that was it. A big disappointment. Right, but once we got to Canada, it took us 5 days to cross. We sailed on the Empress of Australia, which was a nice ship. And we ended up in Quebec as a landing port. And that night we were put on the train from Quebec to Montreal. Got to Montreal in the morning, and they took us on a tour of Montreal, the mountain and all around, and filling in the day, shall we say. And that night they put us on a train for Toronto. So we arrived in Toronto, and they took us to the which was the main office for the Canadian immigrants, was to go through the Canada House in Toronto, which was run by Mr. and Mrs. Hobday. There was an assistant there, Mr. George Black. Now it was Mr. Black's job on the Monday, or was it the Sunday, to transport us boys to the various farms that we were going to be assigned. We were all piled into cars, and he went along with us, and he had other ones go different directions otherwise, because it was spread out all over. There were 11 boys and 3 girls in our contingent, and we were all scattered out all over the place.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you remember some of those children, or the names of the other people that came on that boat with you?
Oh, I remember some of them, yes, yeah.
And are you in touch with some of them?
No, well, George is the only one now. George Beardshaw in London. We came out in the same boat, and we knew each other in the home. And there was another chap, Cecil Humphreys. He was dropped off at Ann's Corners. That is this side of St. Catharines, or east of St. Catharines. And I was dropped off in Bismarck Road area. The post office there was Fenwick Post Office. So as they dropped us off, we were delivered to the farmer or owner of the property we're going to, and introduced and whatever. And then we had to sign a paper indenturing us there for 3 years. We couldn't leave that place for 3 years. At the end of that time, the homes then transferred to somewhere else. Now, Mr. Black, the man that delivered us, came around every 3 months to see how we were getting along and see if there was any discrepancies or any thing that shouldn't be going on. But here again, he's talking to you in front of your boss. Dare you say anything? That was the secret. You didn't talk. You just carried on and did what had to be done. So in a sense, there was fear in one hand that, dare I say anything? Am I being mistreated? No, not really. Not being manhandled or anything like that. Yeah, I got a lot of teasing from the way I talked, and then in those days it was pretty broad. Because when I come out here, as I showed you my picture there, I was 14, and I was a runt of a boy, not a big boy, a runt of a boy. So things came pretty hard. I was short. I soon got strong by the work and whatever, but they expected a lot of you for a 14-year-old at the first. Sure, we had seen cattle in our walks in England and horses and all that kind of stuff, but when he says to you, the first thing you're there, go out to the barn and take the horses to the pasture. I go to the barn, the horses are huge Clydesdales. I'm a little short guy. So them things follow me down the road with their big feet. I was scared skinny, but I got used to it. And what I mean, it's just an initial fright, shall we say. Homesick? Yeah. You got homesick. You missed everything that was there before, like you missed the boys, you missed the playgrounds, you missed all the activity that was, because you're here, you're alone. Now, in the farmhouse across the road from where I was put, I got to know the family there and their son-in-law. And he was a homeboy himself, but had come out through a different organization. So they befriended me, him and his wife, and they'd invite me over for the evening to watch or to listen to the radio in those days, with no TV, listen to the radio and the hockey games and things like that. And they became my very close friends. My boss's brother, who lived down the road a quarter mile, had a good-sized family, and we got along fine. They used to come down, and I used to go up there and on a Sunday or on the afternoon to play or something like that, just a change of scenery. And we got along real good. But the work ethic was a pretty strict regimented too. It was hard work, both summer and winter. Winter time was spent with the barn work, the cleaning out, and the hauling away of whatever was there, and the cutting of the wood. The boss would go back into the woods, would take the crosscut saw and the axes. We'd fell a couple of trees, and we'd get about 3 o'clock as well. I have to go and pick up my daughter at the high school. You carry on and trim out the tree and pile it up as you should, and pile the brush as you should. And when you're done, or time to do the chores, come on up. But once the wood was cut, like it took maybe a couple of 3 days to get the tree all cut up into 5 stove-sized wood, which it wasn't then. We'd bring it up into 6-foot logs or whatever. Then it was my job, after the daily chores were done in the barn, to go up there behind the woodshed with a saw, buck saw. It was called a buck saw, and to cut the wood into stove lengths, and split it so it was small enough for the wife inside the kitchen to put it into the wood stove. If it made it too big, I'd hear from both ends of the stick. And but that's how the winter was spent. It was doing chores in the barn and hauling away and cutting the wood and stacking it, and just kept you busy. But it strengthened you. It built your muscles up, and you became strong for the summer. Preston Johnson.
And how would you describe him?
Let's say he was a fair man. Expected a lot, but he left me alone a lot to do the work. But I mean, as I said, he'd go off into the town to pick up his daughter. He took her to school in the morning, and I wouldn't see him until just before lunch. And then mid-afternoon, he'd have to go and pick her up. So it'd be supper time by the time he gets back, pretty well. So working with him was very sparse. As to say, cut down the trees and this kind of stuff, where it takes two men. Harvest time takes 2 men, a loader and a stacker and all that kind of stuff. But that's the way it went.
Would have been going off to high school, and
There was no chance.
no,
I was there to work.
But do you mind? Can you think back to what you would have been thinking as a 14-year-old boy in this strange country, doing this strange work? And
Well, it's what you were told to do. You were assigned to be at that farm and to learn the trade, to learn to work, to serve. And that was the whole idea. Learn and serve. Those memories are engraved in my mind that they'll never leave. Like this autobiography I've written, I did that after 1984.
and
After I'd retired from work.
and what made you want to write that story?
Well,
yours?
I thought it was about time my son and daughter knew from whence I come, what my life was like. because I was a strict father to them. I know that, and they know that. I was brought up in a certain way, and that's the way we bring up children, strict. But they appreciate what was done for them, and I haven't lost any love through it. And I feel, well, I better get this down so they know from whence I come, why I was as I was. Because usually I'm a man of few words. I don't talk too much, only in the latter part of my life here.
Does it feel good starting to tell this story?
Oh yes, yeah. Because I don't think anybody has told the inside story of In the Home. And that's what the biography is about, is inside the home. And it's the boy's life as they grow up. And the way we were treated, the way we enjoyed life, shall we say, because there was enjoyment. They had, I said, the sports programs. They had the inter-homes sports programs, which I've got pictures there of the swimming team and whatever. And well, you learn to enjoy life with what you had around you. If something happened that you got your ears clapped, too bad. Now, I said there were opportunities. Inside the boys' home was a big bakery where they used to bake the bread for the various homes. And some of the boys, after they got out of school, were assigned there as apprentices to learn this kind of work. Now the chap that came out after me, Dennis, who was now passed on 2 years ago, he was assigned in the bakery. He loved it. They learned how to make the bread and stuff like that, and how to handle it. And as I said, it was shipped up to the girls' home, so many loads a day, and out to the other homes. It was a supplier for the home's foundation. Basically, in the Boys' Garden City, that was the only place that you could really learn anything. There was a carpentry shop, but it didn't.
Yeah, just a couple questions. You mentioned a couple of other home children. The
Yes.
fellow that lived across the street from your first farm. You said you made friends with his family.
Dennis Lund.
Okay.
He is now gone.
Is he?
2 years ago.
Do you
His
know?
wife died last winter.
Now, who was the homeboy? Was that Dennis?
Dennis was old boy, yeah.
He was the homeboy. And do you know what organization brought Dennis over to Canada?
I knew him since I was 4 years old. We were in the home together.
Oh.
He was in a different cottage than I was, but I knew him.
Oh, okay. So Dennis was a Bernardo boy.
Oh, yes. yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Because it's important because
Oh,
you
yeah,
we
I
have
said he
so
came
many
out a year
families
later.
looking.
A year later, and he was placed on a farm one side road over. But the family he worked for were son-in-laws of the farm right next across the road from me.
Oh,
So they
right.
came through the farm to his mother's farm, which was next door to where I worked.
Right.
So I saw Dennis day in, day out.
Good. And he was treated fairly well on his
Yes.
farm too.
Yeah,
Good treatment.
They had 3 or 4 young boys and a couple of girls, and it was like a family to him.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
That was the difference.
Good.
Yeah.
And the other question that I have is about your wages that you received from from your farm.
Okay. In the signing of the document, the stipulated wage was $85 a year.
Right.
Breaks down to 4 something a month.
Okay.
Breaks down to 23 cents a day. Isn't that cheap labor?
Very cheap labor. Very cheap. My question is also, who received that money? Was it paid directly to you?
That was supposedly sent into the head office in Toronto,
All
the
right.
home's head office.
Okay, and they would
And it
collect
was,
that for you?
The collector didn't hold it until you were age 21.
Okay.
That's what the
And
idea was.
what deductions were made from that wage on your behalf?
If they had to buy me extra clothing or boots or things like that to keep working on the farm, what I mean, they do wear out.
Right.
So if they had to replenish anything, that was deducted.
All right.
And such as you take me and get my hair cut every 3 weeks in another town.
Okay.
So that would all be deducted.
Okay. Were you ever approached with the idea of selling you life insurance from the Dr. Bernardo homes at all?
No, not from Banana Homes, no.
No. They were doing that back in the earlier
No, I never
years,
heard
and
of
I
that.
wondered by 1938 if they had changed their policy on that one.
Never heard of that, no.
Now you also. Okay, so the dentist that was across the farm from you,
Yes.
he was also the boy that you made reference to that worked in the bakery shop back
Yes,
in London?
yes,
Okay, all right.
yes.
And also you made a statement there, and I don't know if it was a slip of the tongue or what it was, but you said that you're future owners. And then you said, well, boss.
Yeah, future owners.
Is that,
Well, I say owners because they had control over me.
right,
The first one, I was under his wing for 3 years, regardless.
okay, all right. Okay. Did you receive your pay?
I don't remember.
You don't remember, okay.
I
And
don't remember, that's the truth. It may have come, I don't know, don't recall that. I don't think so.
no. And when you signed your indenture contract, did you understand?
Oh no, a
No.
14-year-old kid. What does he know about anything in the law like that? You're just out of public school.
Right, right, okay.
So it's something you were asked to sign and you automatically did it. You've been that way your life. You do this, you do that.
Okay. And generally the treatment of the Bernardo boys in this country, did you know any of the children that were abused?
No, I didn't.
You
No,
didn't. Good.
no.
Good. Okay.
I'd heard about them, but that
Yeah.
was hearsay. I can't prove nothing.
You can't prove it one way or the
No,
other. You heard
no.
about it, but you
Yeah.
didn't know any
It
personally.
apparently happened north, up north a little bit, more north of here.
I find that in the earlier years of the migration movement, there was an awful lot of abuse that went on with these children. But I'm kind of getting the idea that as the years kind of moved on into like the 1930s, I think that Canada had become a little bit more socially aware that that kind of treatment just
Yes,
was
yeah.
outrageous and unacceptable.
Right.
So I'm not really finding that in the years that you came over that it was as rampant as what it was, say, in the earlier 1900s.
It may not have been, no.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of getting
Oh,
the
no,
gist
yeah.
of, which is a godsend, absolutely, because some of it was pretty brutal. So.